We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another Unmuted Monday. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. And if you are, let us know. I see Deb just gave a shout out that she's here. Deb, so good to have you here. Guess what, Deb? I'm actually coming to Indianapolis in October. We'll have to connect about that. So just let us know if you are joining us for the show today. Let us know where you're joining us from. Say hello. It's always great for us to have a sense of who's in the room with us, and we'll invite you along throughout the conversation today. If there's a question that comes up that you have, if you want to get Jahmaal's insight on something, I know either of us are always happy to share our thoughts and perspectives. And we actually really love, and this is the value of a live show, is that we love to hear from you. We love to, as you're listening to the conversation, you start to have something pop up and you think to yourself, gosh, I wonder what they would think about this. This is your opportunity and forum to ask questions, to get a perspective shift, to help you move through this conversation in a way that's relevant and personal for you. So welcome, Carla. Good to have you here. I'm curious if you're going to be at the conference next week. We're both going to be at we met at a conference in Las Vegas last year, and the same one is coming up next week. And I know there's some people that said that they could not be here for the live show that are going to be joining us for the replay. I know Toby just mentioned that. So really excited to have you listen to the conversation either now or in the future. So to get started, a couple things I want to mention, just a couple of quick announcements. I like to keep you all updated on things that are going on in this, in kind of my work and my life. And my book is making a lot of progress. So I'm at the point where an editor is taking it from 100,000 to 70,000 words, and then it's going to be sent off to 2 different publishers that I've been talking to. So more to come on that. My goal is that this book is published in 2025. Super excited about it. And then I'm also working on 3 different songs right now. So 2 are pretty well on their way. We're going to release them in the fall of next year. I've already shared about one of them. And there's going to be another one that's going to release this summer. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you all for the support that you show, for the music that I share and other insights and whatnot. It's just such a gift to have a platform to do all of that here. So curious if anybody wants to drop in. One of the ways we like to start the show is by inviting you to think about what has been a bright spot in your life in the past week. You could say it in the past week, the past weekend, whatever comes to mind for you. But one of the reasons we like to do this is because when we think about unmuting ourselves, a lot of that is rooted in connecting to a deep sense of gratitude, a sense of being present, a sense of self-awareness, and a sense of connecting to things that make us alive and feel joyful. So feel free to drop into the comments what is something that has been a bright spot for you in the past week, the past couple of days. I will kick it off and share mine, and then I'll introduce our guest and bring him on stage because he's going to have a lot of wisdom to share. And it's actually the first conversation we're ever having together, even though we've been connected on LinkedIn for 4 years. So I just know that you're going to really love the conversation we're going to have today. I'll share a bright spot. I was traveling for 9 of the past 10 days, which is unusual for me personally and professionally. Travel, got to see family, got to speak at a conference last week and meet and connect with some of my peers. And I got to spend the first night in my own bed on Saturday night, and it was so good. I slept like a baby. So that's something that that's been a bright spot. And I got to see my husband, hanging out with a few close friends at one of your favorite restaurants. That's awesome. Nathan, and anybody else wants to drop in, feel free. But without further ado, I want to introduce to you our guest for today's show. Jahmaal Marshall is a certified counselor and founder of Listen, Then Speak. He helps clients establish healthy boundaries, which is something I think all of us need, especially now, by dealing with the pain points of burnout, rejection, and trauma. That frees them up to release and to reach their full potential. He's the host of the Listen Then Speak podcast, which, check this out, has been a top 25% podcast since its inception. He's interviewed multiple best-selling authors, entrepreneurs, and mental health advocates. And as you all know, that's a topic, mental health. We just talked about it last month with Leslie Wyrick, and it's something that comes up frequently in the conversations on this show. Mental health advocates, while consistently demonstrating the ability to pull out information not highlighted in other interviews. He's somebody who really focuses on getting to the why, getting to the root of things, which I so appreciate as a fellow curious and inquisitive person. I just know that we're going to have a great conversation today because we both value and prioritize that. Make sure you follow him on LinkedIn, which is where he and I connected back in 2020. And I hope that you enjoy this very first conversation that we are having together. So please give a warm welcome to Jahmaal Marshall.
Hey, friend.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm so glad to have you here because this has been a long time coming. It's been a concept for a couple of years. And then I was like, okay, we just need to actually do this. So does June work? Because I'm done pushing this off. We need to talk.
2024 is a year of actualization. So it's happening.
Exactly. Perfect. And I know just because of what you're passionate about and because I see you as somebody who is brave and courageous and talks about the things that people think but don't always talk about. And I think that is something I'm always drawn to that in people because I think it's easier to not do that. But I think the greatest transformation happens when we do. So I'm curious to start things off. If you could share with us a version of your own unmuting journey. So if you could think about an area of your life where you have felt silenced, muted, maybe there was a suppression of expression in some way, and just take us through a journey of what you did to kind of work through that.
Oh man, we're getting into it right off the bat. Okay.
There's no softballs here. I know. I'm
Man,
we just go. I don't really,
she went straight Winfrey on me, y'all. Okay, well, let's go. Well, one, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here and just to talk to your audience and those on Team Replay. Hello, from our nation's capital. So just to get straight into it, I don't want to go with the heaviest thing, but I think people deserve to know who don't know me that well. I felt muted as a child, and not because someone told me, "Hey, you need to shut up." I had a parent, one who was divine, and one because of his own addictions was mean enough to be Satan himself, and that would be my dad. And when he was under the influence of alcohol, or when under the influence of cocaine, which were his two drugs of choices, he was very unpredictable. And so I did not know how to read him. When you go to your parents for love, for affirmation, you go to ask questions that you're curious about. I was in fear of him. And so in a sense, it wasn't him that muted me. It was me that muted myself because I told myself, and sometimes I felt that I was in physical danger. And so when your brain tells you that, it's like, what do you do to feel safe? Well, just be quiet. Don't be around. Don't be in said person's presence. And then I began to tell myself that is how all men are, because that's how my dad was. And so I avoided conversations and contact with people because I did not feel safe. So it was easier to kind of shut myself down because everyone wants to feel safe. you know.
Yeah.
And so I think from in the early part of childhood, I learned to turn things off and turn things on. I don't know if you've been around the urban community, we have a word that we have coined called code switching. I learned to switch code in any environment I was in to keep myself safe. So whatever was the thing that was the popular thing to do, I would do it. Whatever was the thing to not do, like the big no-nos, I found out what they were, and I was 7 steps ahead of everyone. And so as a professional, I even learned like these are the executives that you want to be around and talk to. These are the projects you want to say yes to. But I wore myself out and burned myself out by staying 7 steps ahead. I thought I was smarter, but I was actually creating a quicksand of my own making. But the narrative handed to me was that you aren't safe. And so you have to create safety. And when you need to speak up and when you need to advocate, you're going to be in danger. So don't say anything. But as a result of that, I was filled with resentment. That person that you're just waiting for the ground to open up and swallow them because you just have never stood up to them. That was like me just fuming with certain people that I could never say no to. But it's like, Jahmaal, you muted yourself, but I muted myself as a result of what I believed. Like I say with my clients, your belief will always inform how you behave.
Say that again.
Your belief will always inform how you behave. No matter what you know, no matter how many quotes you have, no matter what your Instagram says, what you believe will always inform how you behave.
Yes. So take us through so how you're showing up in the world. Let's say you're like 14. What does 14-year-old Jahmaal look like in the world, at school, in peer relationships? Like, what does that look like?
That's a really good question. 14-year-old Jahmaal looks like year old Jahmaal is a young man of excellence. Everything is done right. He doesn't kick up the dust, doesn't trouble the waters. Everything is done right. So that's 14-year-old Jahmaal. 14-year-old Jahmaal is on the swim team. He's also on the football team. He's just the person that seemingly has it all together. That's 14-year-old Jahmaal. And at parent teacher conferences, there's really never any complaints about him, because if there is, and it gets to dad, well, there's going to be hell to pay. So that's 14-year-old Jahmaal.
Was anyone safe for you then? Like anybody, is
My
there anyone you
mom.
felt like you could remotely be 15% of yourself with? Your mom.
My mom, I'm the youngest of four, so the sibling right above me is Jasmine. I felt really safe around her. So, and I felt really, I'll say my oldest sister too. All my sisters, I felt safe around them, but I did not feel safe because of the narrative I created in my head. When you create narratives, what you will do is project on other people your insecurities. You project onto them what you think they're thinking about you. And so even if I was seemingly safe, in my mind's eye, I wasn't.
Yeah, we're gonna dig into that more because I think that's a really interesting thing that like everybody deals with in some way. That the projection piece of that and the narrative and how that influences things. I'm curious. Take us through the journey of 14-year-old Jahmaal. This is like a lot. This could be like 7 hours of a conversation. 14-year-old Jahmaal to like how you're now the one that has a podcast called Listen, Then Speak, and you're connecting to the ways that you can, get to the root causes and talk about the things that are hard and talk about trauma. And I'm curious, like what was the catalyst for that transformation, or the series of catalysts for that transformation for you?
Oh man, we're going really deep. I'm gonna try to do my best for your audience to spare them too much pain. But I would say the catalyst from there to where I got was a series of addictions of my own, which were really heavy. Also, some eating disorders. Um, also being held at gunpoint. I mean, there was a ton of things. Like, I don't look like what I've been through. I should have like a head full of gray hair. And then around 2009 was when I started my career at Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Prisons, off the Senate side of the Capitol. And I was supposed to go into a co-op. For whatever reason, HR did not get my paperwork in time. So I actually literally worked myself out of a position. And so I literally outworked the GS as high as I could go. And so I had to leave the government, which was a really nice job. But I realized around this time, I found out about some residential therapy in the Midwest. and I was full of rage, full of bitterness and unforgiveness towards my dad just because of the upbringing I had. And I used that as an excuse for my own addictions, my eating disorders, the way I chose relationships. And I said, man, I found out about some counseling and I said, okay, well, I'm not working right now. I'm done with school. I'd already graduated from Regent University, cum laude, in my section, the top of my class with a bachelor's of science in psychology. And I said, okay, I have some time on my hands. I need to help others. My major was psychology. I was always told you'd make a really good counselor. And I was like, I don't want to be a shrink, you know, but I knew before helping others, it's just like you can only lead others as far as you've gone yourself. I needed help. And so I took that time to actually go away and invested uh, more than 7 months and thousands of dollars into my own. We're both business owners, and the principle: before you charge top dollar, make sure you've invested that yourself. So um, it was after I finished the initial 7 months where they said we'd like for you to do an internship here, and I was like, here in the Midwest, because I'm originally from LA. I've lived in DC. I was just like, this ain't exactly my idea of fun. But I prayed, I meditated, I gave that to God, and I said, if you want me to be here, we'll see what happens. And so they actually brought me on as an intern. And through that time, I began taking training, in the clinical, in how to get certified and in counseling and practicum. Um, and I was like, okay. And 3 years later, I became a certified counselor myself. Um, and it was weird, because I wasn't later on in 2015, I would become one of three senior counselors, but I wasn't a senior counselor, obviously, when I first became a counselor. So I got my counselees and clients assigned to me, but each one of them had issues with their dads. It was just amazing the correlation, how I was able to speak into their lives and pull out, different root causes in them to really help them get. It had a correlation story, and it was like you couldn't have planned it. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
That is so wild, and I'm thinking through. I mean, because you mentioned like rage, the bitterness, the anger, the unforgiveness, which would be a very natural place to be given what your experience was. What do you think led you to go the route that you did of making this decision? Because you people can have an awareness of like, hey, maybe I should go to counseling, maybe I should pursue this, maybe I should do my own healing. A lot of people might have an awareness of that, but not actually do anything. So I'm curious, what do you think it was that prompted you to then take what was a source of so much pain and so much trauma and make the decision fairly early on? I mean, like, you're pretty young to make the decision to then do what you did. Like, what do you think? What was it within you, outside of you, that maybe facilitated that decision?
Rachel, I'm gonna just be straight up. Like back then, obviously, I was 24. I didn't have a business acumen, but I always believed in integrity. I believed in character, and I knew that it brought me life to help other people. It was weird, like growing up, even in my late teens, early 20s. Most of my friends were like in their late 30s and 40s, and even some 50s. So I always was around older people, and they would always ask me for different advice, and the advice I had was always practical and applicable. So I was like, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Oddly enough, I just saw so much darkness within myself, and I said, I'm not going to function and operate in hypocrisy. Now, none of us humans can operate in perfection. That's a fallacy. However, I just said, in order for me to really help people, and it wasn't about the certification. I mean, obviously, we know from the Bible, or whatever ancient writing you subscribe to, you render to Caesar what is Caesar's. But it was about me, like, actually wanting to get the help before offering help. There was so much raw scar tissue inside of me. And even at that young age, I was just like, I think this needs to be dealt with. Otherwise, you don't want to trauma bond with your own client in a way that's unhealthy, and you don't want what they're telling you to trigger you. Does that make sense?
100%, 100. Because that happens a lot. It's like that's what they call like the wounded healer, right? It's like
Hmm.
the person who has the wound. So many people that get into spaces that have a lot of darkness in them. It's like you don't get into that because your life has been like
Right.
that's not. and
No,
if your life has been like that, I'm not trusting you with my stuff. Like no offense, but like,
I hear you.
you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not. I don't know that you're gonna get me if you haven't also struggled. If you haven't also so I think that's wise of you too, because there are a lot of people. that get into it and they've checked the box, they haven't really done their own work. They haven't really done the work. And then
Yeah,
they do
and
exactly what you're talking about.
we learned, like, one of my claims to fame. It's a little shady the way I say it, but, like, of course, we met in 2020, but of course, that was the year of the coach. Everything moving turned into a coach. I was like, you met me walking through the forest because I love going on nature walks, and if I stepped on a slug, I'm like, oh, I stepped on a life coach. It's like everything became a coach. It's like
Yeah.
I'm not someone who got laid off from a job during COVID and said I want to become a life coach. This is my life story. This is something I've been doing for years. This is something where I've gained experience, but also a place where, one of my clients, we were talking about pricing and everything like that. She was like, I love the pricing that your stuff comes at. She said, because it costs a certain price, but it costs you your life to actually deal in this transformation for your clients and for our group. And so this is not just something that I've gotten a certification in so that I could make money. This is actually something that I live and breathe.
Yeah. And I think those are the people that are best at doing this work. I think people that are doing what you're doing, that have the experience and perspective that you have, that have the genuine empathy and compassion, but not crossing a line. So I think I'm curious. I know one of the things you shared, I forget what show was on. You had said something about I'd lived to please others and rarely gave any resistance to the demands of those around me. This led to chronic procrastination, perfectionism, horrible boundaries, and various addictions to numb pain. You touched on some of that. I'm curious. I think one of the areas, so in the work that I do around talking about unmuting and this concept of self-silencing, one of the reasons we do it is to avoid conflict. And so people self-silence and they don't set a boundary. They let themselves be walked all over, or they'll let themselves be violated in some way because I don't want to rock the boat or cause a conflict. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you found most helpful with the clients that you've supported and just in your own life in general at, if someone says, gosh, it's so hard for me to set boundaries with people. I really want to make everybody happy. If you could get in their ear for a couple minutes and either ask them some questions. I know curiosity is important for you. You could either ask them some questions or tell them some truths. What would you say?
I think before telling them a truth, I'd have to ask some questions first. That's part of what Listen and Speak is about. I often say 70 to 90% of the best sessions, whether it's a group or whether it's one-on-one, should be listening. If I can't listen for your pain point, I won't know how to speak to it. I won't know how to develop a program that actually gets you results that matter to you. And I think too many times we even have people in our wellness space who are too quick to speak to something without understanding the pain point. Very unwise. And so I would actually ask them, I would go down to the root. I talk about childhood them, teenage them. What are the narratives? What are the things being handed? What are the events that surround you? What is informing your belief system? Because, most of us in the wellness space have all been trained in CPT. What is that? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Nothing wrong with CPT. There's a lot of merit for that. But in my practice, I want to deal with the belief that informs the behavior. Because what you believe, we can change your behavior temporarily. We can put a Band-Aid on it. But what do you believe? And so I'd want to ask them, what has informed this belief? I'm going to take a journey with me. If you think about, I'm always in the woods. We have around here in DC, what? Deer, wild turkey, and foxes. I am walking through there freely because I never feel like I'm in any real danger. Foxes are very skittish. Deer, unless you have pheromones on you, they're not going to come around you. Wild turkey, yeah. If there's a bear, then my life is in real danger. And so a lot of times psychologically, because of the things we've been through, or said person, they feel like there is a bear in the woods with them. And it informs their behavior where they'll either run and retreat or mute and dial back because their brain is telling them, I am in danger. I'd ask them, what narratives, what has been handed to you? What has happened that makes you feel, or what true real data points have put you in danger? Let's deal with that first. That's dealing with things at the core, because some of those real data points, the way we operate, are informed by things that we've been through.
Yes.
And then I can't say what, because no one size doesn't fit all. And then I'll deal with that data and then take that data and formulate what is the truth then. Even though what happened, that is your truth, then what is another truth that we can take to re-inform the neuroplasticity of our brain? Because the mind is a control tower to the body.
Yes, it is. Well, something you said reminded me of something my dad has said for years. He's like my Yoda. I mean, my dad's I mean, he's like about 5'5", so he's like sort of like, but like he's
Oh.
he's so cute. I know. And he says like people come by their beliefs honestly.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like that's what I'm hearing and what you're saying is like it's like people, nobody gets to this point of having a certain belief of thinking the bears in the woods all the time if they never had an experience that made them feel like there was a bear in the woods about to eat them. Like people don't make that up. It's like for the most part, there's some version of that that's true. Like the extent of it, who knows? But like there's some version of a thing that elicited that response in you. And so I think, what are the most common ways that you see people struggling to set healthy boundaries in their lives, in their work, in their relationships? Or are there certain like themes that you see in people?
Definitely. I work mostly with senior directors and MVPs. Now, you think that's a high pressure position. So you have direct reports. You have to answer to not only your manager, who's probably the CEO, and the board. That's a lot of pressure from both sides. And one, it can be called, I had a whole section titled The Fear of Delegation. It's like, okay, if my staff can't do it right, I'm just going to do it because it has to be done perfect. Because if not presented perfect and excellent, it's just not. That's not your job. There's people who are subject matter experts who are put in place to do that job. Perfect done is better than perfect. And so a lot of times the fear of delegating, and also the fear of, if you think about even some VPs and senior directors, if you think about corporate, that is the path to promotion. They all didn't want to be that. Some of them just wanted to be the direct reports, but now the people who you were once friends with now report to you. How do you then draw a boundary line that actually keeps the mission of the corporate going forward? Drawing those boundary lines personally and professionally, that can be very difficult. 60 to 70% of my clients are females. The difficult thing with the female clients is that they have to be the social barometer for everything, for the work group, for the friend group, for the home group, for the children, for the community group, for the church, or whatever their religion may be. And so it's like they never get a chance to be off. It's like I have to always be on. When do I get a chance to focus on me without guilt and without false guilt? And so dealing with the narrative of that false guilt, dealing with the desire to, I call it auto or over accommodate. Let me always say yes, because if I say no, God forbid. And then what is that fear of rejection to saying no? Where does that come from? So dealing with the root causes of boundaries with direct reports, as well as with your own manager, and also the desire to over accommodate, where you're losing time and energy and also revenue. Because when you lose time and energy, that's what? Time is our one non-renewable resource. But we will spend time on what we believe is most important because of the narrative handed to us. We will spend time where it's not even warranted because fear is our motivation.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think, as what you're sharing, that sense of over accommodation, I think is so common. I think I'm curious about your perspective on this. My perspective has, for a lot of it, been that there's a fear of that. There's a belief, like a core belief, that our value is rooted in our usefulness and our helpfulness. And if we are useful and helpful, then we have value. And if we are not useful and helpful to the extent that we think we could be, meaning saying yes to everything, then we are not valuable. If we are not valuable, we're kind of nothing and nobody. And like the ultimate expression of nobodyness and nothingness is not existing. And that's like so painful. So I mean, I really do take it to that level. I'm curious about your perspective, like what you see as like the root cause a lot of the times beneath that, because that's what I often see is just this sense of I have to be useful, I have to be helpful, I have to be valuable. I'm curious if you see that or if you see other things.
I think it depends on the client. With some, it depends on their also cultural background. Even though I have 70% females, I noticed that it draws in a lot of different cultural backgrounds. So I've had everything from white to black to South Asian to Asian to Asian Pacific Islander. And the struggles can be different because culturally in the workplace, if I'm seen a certain way, I feel like I need to bring more to the table. And so there's a willingness to auto accommodate, because if I don't, then I may not get the promotion. I may not be seen, or I'm the one who's bringing all the ideas. My ideas are being taken and used by other people and other teams, and they're getting promotions. It's like I do all the work. It's not even on my KPIs, and you get bonuses. And so actually training them how to navigate those spaces, because if it's a person's bread and butter, there's also some fear attached to if I make the wrong move, then we don't have income coming in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do we navigate those spaces where in a situation I feel like I'm in survival mode, we want to position you to thrive and to move up the ladder. And even how to advocate for yourself in a way where it's almost like in sales where a person's already enrolled and bought in. You want your manager and your direct reports to buy in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing you're saying here is like Tiffany drops a very good point. Like I was talking to a woman. I met a woman at a conference, and she's black, and she was sharing with me something that happened years ago when she was preparing a presentation to present for work, and she was not confident in her public speaking ability. So a colleague of hers was like, "Hey, I'll present that. Since you don't really like public speaking, I'll present it at the meeting." And so the woman I was talking to was not part of this meeting. And then the woman that presented it, not surprisingly, took all of the credit and didn't acknowledge it until like 6 years later, until June of 2020. She reaches out to this woman and says, "By the way, like I knew what I was doing and I'm really sorry." But like,
Mm.
I, if someone noticed that that was happening, because it was so blatant. I mean, there's like, no, you can't even like, there's no arguing with what happened. Like
Mhm.
her ideas and her hard work was co-opted by somebody else, and she was not given any of the credit. That is factually what happened. But to your point, there was a fear and concern of like, well, I don't want to show up as like angry or aggressive because of the
Mhm.
labels that are going to be put on me if I do that, that will not be put on somebody else. I'm curious, like if somebody had a situation at work, I know it depend on so many factors, like who their boss is and the circumstances of the
Right.
situation. But if a client came to you and said, "This is what happened at work," where like this person completely took credit for all the work that I did, and I missed out on an opportunity because of it, like, is there something that you would like ask them, or maybe, you know, want to understand that might help them work through that? I'm so curious.
Well, first, I wanted to say I would not gaslight them because a
Mm-mm.
lot of times folks in the wellness space who aren't good listeners will say, "Well, what did you do?" You
Oh.
don't want to ask that question. You don't want to put it on them to make it their fault and put them at the center of it because obviously they have, in a sense, been victimized, and that is very traumatic. That will inform the way that they do business and the way that they run in corporate from there on out, unless it's addressed. Two, on a practical note, and I want to be very quick and honor our time here
Sure.
because I do come from an HR background. Once I switched back into working corporate nonprofit, talk to your HR. That's what they're there for. Talk to your ELC. That's what they're there for. Report it. Obviously, if it's something of that magnitude, I don't, that was 60 years ago. Now you have what you call written receipts. You know, your email, any language that was exchanged between you and that person, that is a written receipt of the dialogue that's going to prove your point. Now, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, especially if you're a person of color, that can be a place of fear of like, man, if I report this, who are they connected to? Who
Mm-hmm.
sponsors them, who mentors
Mm-hmm.
them, because it's all sometimes who you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you have to deal with all those, gather as much data as possible where you power position yourself. Um, I had to do it once in a different sense in an organization where I was one of three senior counselors and the only Black staff member, but I had enough data and enough receipts where let's just say I was in a sense unstoppable. So, and I had to take it to the CEO.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't fire me. I resigned. And so in a sense, um, I have to get all the data from my clients, and then from there, that's how you power position yourself. You power position yourself based on all the data and you build your case. Just like
Mm-hmm.
when someone is enforcing too much work on you and you're a place of burnout, you present what? Your KPIs. This is why you all hired me. This is why you brought me on. You reinforce your mission minded. Like, I want to, not so much I want to stay here, but this is the mission that I believe in. I cannot help you complete this mission if I'm taking projects from various teams. Always present the receipts. I love
Mm-hmm.
the infamous Whitney Houston, Diana Sawyer interview. Show me the receipts.
Mm-hmm.
What you have on paper, that is your money shot right there.
Mm.
That is a gold mine of what you have on paper. And
Yeah.
then with the client, on a personal note, from a clientele counselee standpoint, I would actually deal with the pain points because that pain and that scar tissue needs to be addressed because that hurt is definitely going to inform the way that they approach any projects. When you've had the wind knocked out of you and your morale goes down, you don't
Mm-hmm.
use your lunch break to level up on your job. You lose your lunch break to look for other assignments.
You sure do. You sure do. And people miss out on that, right? They just like organizations have no idea that like this like necessary they have I don't even want to say that. A lot of organizations know this stuff is happening, they don't do anything about it. Um, let's call a spade a spade. Because they don't want to, because it makes them uncomfortable. And so leadership doesn't want to have to address it. So we're like, if we just ignore this, we'll put this in a box on a shelf somewhere. And if someone doesn't get loud enough, then we'll just, not my problem. I mean, that happens. Do you see that? I feel like I see that happening all the time.
Statistically, I mean, I'm amazed at. I'm looking at. We got Phil here. We got some legends in the
We got
in the
Phil,
comments.
yes.
Somebody LinkedIn user. I can't see them on this end, but hello.
I know. Phil and Tiffany and Bill Bradford.
The fact that it happens as much as it does is extremely sad. I'm at least grateful that in the last 3.5, 4 years, when it's been addressed, there is some forward movement. I'm seeing more forward movement in the last 4 years than I've seen the whole time I've been alive, and I've been on the planet nearly 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you celebrating your 40th this year also?
Yes.
Me too. Next month.
Oh, December. Happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to you. Hey, 1984. And you said that, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, a second. There's something else. There's another question I want to ask you. I just want to see if there's anything else about that you wanted to bring light to, bring up, share based on anything that we've talked about so far that you haven't said.
I think, even doing work with senior directors and VPs is giving them a safe place, because we know your coworkers aren't your friends. It's difficult to actually unearth this stuff and then find out a path forward amongst coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Because of, I had a whole speech actually stolen from me from one of our L2 leaders. And it's just like, who do I talk to about this? It's like, maybe I should just take it straight to them and snatch their wig off and just be done with it, because, Jahmaal, I'll actually do it. I have a strange fearlessness about me in corporate spaces where I kind of don't care, but I know everyone's not like that. Yeah. I've had DMs that said, everyone's not like you, Jahmaal. You hit a little differently. I was like, I was born to rock the boat, but I embraced when I was unmuted. Some people keep themselves muted. So on a serious note, I would say find a safe space, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a coach, a therapist, to actually process this, because when resentment builds up, you can actually find yourself burning a bridge that may, affect not just your revenue and your livelihood, but also your well-being. And I don't want to leave that on a sad note, because it's just like, when something like that has been perpetrated on you, you do want to deal with it. And the best way to deal with that is finding a safe place with someone who is certified, who understands how to navigate that space with you.
Yeah, 100%. And I've seen a therapist just about every week I'm in town for the past 3.5 years. Like Saturday, my friends are like, so like after therapy on Saturday, could we do brunch at like 11:30? It's just like a known. I'll call my mom. She'll be like, you're on your way to therapy, right? I'm like, yes. Like I need that, like I need that in my life. And by the way, Elizabeth Balvin from Southern California says, my first introduction to both of us. Thoroughly enjoying it. Elizabeth, we're glad that you're here. Welcome.
Hey, Liz.
Hey, more to come. I'm wondering, there was something else that I heard that you say that, and I want to touch on men's mental health too. There's so many things we could talk for 3 hours, but there was something else that I read that you said that I think is so. I'm relating into it in like some stuff I've happened in my own personal life. There's certain family dynamics that can be a little challenging, or certain relationships we have. You had said, remember, their drama is not your priority. Pick your battles wisely. And I think people will sort of, for me, when I talk about being unmuted, people often think that means I'm just going to say my piece whenever I want. It's like, there's a certain level of discernment associated with unmuting yourself. Yes. I really value and speak about a lot. It's like an underpinning of what I believe that means. So I'm curious, when someone is caught up in a situation where there's like a lot of drama, and the temptation is to get sucked into that, and that could be a trauma-related response of like, I'm just a chaos junkie, and that's where I feel safe, being in a state of things being all over the place. It's familiar to me, so it feels safe. You pick your battles wisely. I'm curious if you want to share where that insight comes from, and if there's anything around that you think would bring value to people in the conversation today that might be caught up in their own little drama webs. Yeah.
Rachel, that is an amazing question. I wanted to say hi to Jane in the comments. She's joining us all the way from Kenya. We're going global here. All right.
We are. She's like, I love the point on receipt, so thank you, Whitney Houston. But yes, like... And my sister's name is Jane, so hey, shout out to you. Okay.
Sweet. And Phil is dropping some nuggets in the comments here. But
See.
I want to address that in just some personal stories. In that I did a post. This was a long time ago. I don't even know if I think I was trying to be active on Facebook. I'm horrible on Facebook. Um, and it was called like the narcissist within. We
Mm.
hear that word like so much, and like people don't realize like NPD is an actual psychological disorder. Like narcissism is a real thing. It's not just, oh, I don't like that person, they're a narcissist.
Yeah.
Not realizing that each of us have some level of narcissism within us
Mhm.
that need to be needed, that need to be the shoulder to lean on. Like you said, that chaos junkie. And growing up, I'm a serial empath. Like I tell people, like if you've ever watched the X-Men animated series, I can put Jean Grey to shame. I don't like the fact that I feel everything. And so you that desire to solve everyone's problems. And I had to realize like there was a family member pretty close to me, and it was like anytime something came up, my phone would ring. I would always answer it, no matter what time of night, no boundaries, and I would always solve it, whether it was transportation, whether it was money, whether it was picking someone up, whether it was childcare. And I had to realize, like, they are making their urgency my emergency. So, your urgency is not my emergency. This is not my battle. And I share with them to their face. I say, you know what? I noticed that I've been enabling you. Instead of enabling you, I now want to empower you.
Mhm.
And I'm going to empower you to take responsibility so that you grow and so that we both grow. As we grow
Mhm.
separately, we'll grow as a collective, but this is not healthy.
Yeah.
And so for those, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's someone on your body, whether it's your in your clientele, or whether it's someone in your direct reports, don't allow their urgency to become your emergency.
Mhm.
Prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. They
Mhm.
need to learn that, whether the easy way or the hard way. And sometimes it'll be the hard way, but I can't say don't have false guilt. I don't like those kind of quotes, don't or stop. A
Yeah.
person won't stop doing anything. They're going to do what feels safe to them because that's what their brain has told them. I
Yeah.
don't shame any clients for their coping mechanisms. That's how they cope. Sometimes people
Yeah.
cope by being a chaos junkie, but you
Mhm.
had to deal with that root cause. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's something that I had to address within myself. Why do you feel like you always need to meet this need? Do you feel like you need to be this person's savior?
Mhm.
You're damaging them, you're enabling them, and you're also damaging yourself, and you're starting to grow in resentment. You need to confront the matter head on.
Mhm. Can I ask how if you're able to share just like generally the response you got when you, because I think people are afraid. They're like, oh, if I say anything, this person's they're gonna just like come back at me with all this whatever, and they're gonna be mad at me, and then that's gonna drive me further away. And what the response when you did that?
Yeah, I want to be brutally honest with your audience. They hung up on me the first time.
Mm.
So I want to, one thing I tell each of my clients too, I don't do toxic positivity.
Mm.
You see those LinkedIn or those Facebook quotes where just seem, or Instagram where everything just seems like it worked out perfectly. I'm like, bull, I can't say that for a
Yeah.
little word. you know.
I'm with you.
And I think I shared a post a month and a half ago about a board member, who was a very high net worth donor that I stood up 2 years ago. They didn't speak to me for a year. You will lose people when you establish boundaries.
Mhm.
But you know what? A thin herd moves quicker than a packed one.
Mhm.
What will you gain? How will you experience addition by subtraction? And
Mhm.
over time, it took the better part of about 3 or 4 months. They learned to respect me, because the thing is, people always say, I got boundaries. Your boundaries are for you. When you respect them, other people will. I didn't
Yes.
respect my own boundaries, so how could I expect them to?
Yes.
And they got to see, like, okay, you know what? This man means business, and I need to get my stuff together.
Yes.
It had to happen. It was good for both of us.
It's interesting you say that because I was speaking at a women's conference in the real estate space on Friday, and I interviewed one of the leaders of this group ahead of time, and I was asking her to share a story about a time she advocated for herself. And she told me the story about she had this one client who was just a nightmare. Like she would get sick she would start to feel sick to her stomach every time she would see this person's name like pop up on her phone. And it was bad. I mean, it was affecting her health in every way. It was affecting her sleep. It was affecting how she showed up in her family. And she reached out to him and she said, "Look, I, 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 I love your family. I love the property. I think you're going to do amazing things, but the way that you're handling this transaction, like, is not working for me, and I'm noticing that this affecting my energy. I'm so stressed out all the time. It's drawing me away from things that matter to me, and so I'm going to give you some suggestions for other realtors that could help you out." And of course, he pushes back. No, 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 no. And she's like, this is non-negotiable. I've actually already filled out the paperwork. And so this is moving forward. And so I know you're going to be in good hands. But she was like, but she tolerated potentially weeks, if not months, of dealing with somebody who is just like draining her dry. And then she said 2 months later, he follows up with her and is like, his property still hadn't sold. And he was begging her to take him back. And she was like, okay, under these conditions, like you give me at least an hour, because realtors, my brother's a realtor, they're like on their phones all the time. But this guy wanted like a 5-minute response time. She's like, that's not happening. So an hour response, you are not calling me before 8, you are not calling me after 6. And like she laid down boundaries after she fired a client that was like a potential, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars of financial loss releasing this client and the property that he was trying to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, not surprisingly to, you know, I mean, you're aware of how this stuff works. She said this guy not only respected the boundaries, but he has been a major referral source for her now.
Isn't that amazing?
It's like the thing we're afraid of. We think if I do this thing, then people are going to judge me. No, actually, think about anybody that you know who has really healthy boundaries. I mean, my own pastor said that about me to a friend of mine. He was like, they were going to ask me to do something. And he was like, I don't think Rachel's going to say yes to that. She's very well boundaried.
I love it. I love it.
Like, especially in church settings, people can be guilted to the moon. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you need to. And I'm like, no, I'm going to decide what I need to do. Thank you so much. But I burned out 7 years ago and learned the hard way. So it's like, anyway, but all that to say, it's the boundary piece is something. I love what you said about how, you know, your boundaries are for you. And then when you respect them, other people will.
Yeah.
They may not like them. Okay. Sorry, not sorry.
Like Nathan, he can put this in the comment section. Like it's another quote I put down probably like 5 months ago. The seed you sow is the crop you reap. Mm-hmm. And so if you are sowing seeds that you have boundaries, that you actually honor your schedule, your calendar, what you have set up, especially if you're a married couple, other people will respect that. If you put out there and lead with an energy that you are always renegotiating your non-negotiables, guess what? You have put yourself on the clearance rack. Mm-hmm. So picture yourself in Neiman Marcus. Put yourself in the most expensive section. Yeah. You notice you get fewer people. Everybody's around the clearance rack. When you are on the clearance rack, everyone has access to you.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny you say that because there was another quote that I pulled of something you said, where you said you don't have to discount. This is related to pricing. It's tangential, but said you don't have to discount your prices and put yourself on clearance because of what you believe. Access should not be granted to everyone. I'm just going to leave that microphone over here. But like, what informed that perspective for you? Because I think a lot of times in helping professions, there's a tendency, especially, right, for people to feel like I just need to be accessible to everybody, even if that means compromising and sacrificing myself. So what would you say to someone who maybe feels that way? Or would you ask them?
She's straight doing a Tamron Hall, getting into it. Okay, I love it. I would say to that person, one, when you believe it, they will, you know? Mm-hmm. And Rachel, let's be honest, we've all been there. You know, we're entrepreneurs, but we don't start off. I'm looking at Phil, I'm looking in the comment section of those who are coming back. We don't start off with a business acumen. And so we think like, if I just discount everything, I want to help so many people, because that should really be the consensus. You should want to help. Yeah. You know, your business should always be built on other people. When it's about other people, I'm telling you, whether you're a person of faith or not, God will give the increase. I'm trying to tell you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But when you get into the mindset of let me just lower everything, you're going to give access to people who are going to drain you to the dregs. Yeah. And the thing is the weird thing about the psychology of this is what people pay for, they show up for. Mm-hmm. If you are very, very discounted, you'll get clients like your brother or that female who contacted you had, where they're just, and I'm not saying that that's his case, but they are draining you because it's like they haven't made a high investment. When you charge that high ticket, I'm telling you, they will do, and especially those who pay up front, they will literally, you'll almost ask them like, man, you're ahead of me. Because I also give homework. I give homework to float my clients in between sessions weekly so that I can measure progress. Talk therapy, to me, in my opinion, is not very effective. Yeah. You have to measure progress. Mm-hmm. And so with those clients who they pay right up front and they're right at, you just be surprised like how they want it so bad, versus those who are like, you know, well, can I drop, $500 here and this, that, and there. When they're making a lot of excuses, they're gonna be a nightmare for you. And so I just want to say from a price, and I know we're not here to talk about money and stuff like that and pricing and business. That's not what this conversation is about. But even that, when you have bad boundaries with that, you're gonna draw in people that have really bad boundaries, and it's gonna drain you. Like, I'm anti-burnout. If I'm burning out because I have a bunch of clients on my caseload that aren't really taking this thing seriously, that what does that say about the brand?
Yeah.
And so when you target even a certain tax bracket, you'll realize that these people make fast decisions and they get to work. They may have some issues. Obviously, that's what they're coming to you for, so you can solve the problem. But they have no problem doing the work, and they don't make a whole lot of excuses. And we have to ask ourselves that where we've invested very little, are we that involved? Let's be honest. Let's all of us be honest. And where we've invested a lot, I'm telling you, we are right there like a straight A student because we want to make a return on that investment.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like you will push, there were certain people that will not follow you to that next level. And that's okay because it's scary, right? Sometimes as a business, you can feel like, but if I go there, then no one's going to follow me. No, no, no. You get into a new club. Like there's just,
Mhm.
it's different, you know? And I think I've seen that happen with myself too. It's like as a speaker, when I'm like raising rates or when I'm having conversations about that, the client that paid me more than I'd ever gotten paid for a keynote ever was like, you did more for us than we've ever had anyone do. You should consider raising your rates. The person who paid me the most ever was like, you should consider charging more. Meanwhile, there might be people that pay a quarter of that are like trying to nickel and dime everything. And then I'm just like, this doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? And it's like, focus on the ones that see it. Focus on the ones that see it. You know?
Boom.
Like,
Because the ones that see it, it's not a hassle. It's not a back and forth. Now, granted, depending on, and I know this is a business owner, when you go corporate, they have the money, they have the budget set aside for it. So, of course, they may see it a little sooner because they can just write the check and give you the money. When it's an individual vendor or another small business, it may take a little bit more convincing. But if they're already pre-enrolled, it shouldn't take that much convincing. I just know from my own experience.
yeah. Well, I wonder in the last like 7 minutes or so we have in the conversation, there were some things you touched on earlier when you were talking about your journey, when you were like in your late teens, early 20s, of some of the things from like a mental health perspective that you were struggling with. You mentioned one that is not talked about by men often, but that absolutely affects men, but it's just not talked about. And that was like eating disorders. And there may have been other aspects of sort of manifestations of or responses to the trauma you experienced growing up, and how that showed up, because there's a strong link between eating disorders and self-silencing behaviors, which is like not surprising. So I'm curious. I know we don't, these flavor of the month things like, oh, May is mental health month. It's like every month is mental health. Every day is, let's focus on mental health. Can we please? Like literally. And you and I would say, even in the things we share online, it's like this conversation is relevant 24/7. It is not just like these month observances is like, anyway.
Yeah, I'm
That's
fiercely anti-trend.
Right? It's like just, oh, this is necessary all the time to talk about this. So I'm curious, when you see, because I know that you must have like people, whether it's commenting or sending you DMs or stuff, like, are there certain things that you feel like you've shared that are like directly connected to mental health, mental wellness, that people have been particularly responsive to when you've shared certain things, maybe come to you and said like, oh my gosh, like same, me too. I get that. I struggle with that too. Are there certain like topics that you've touched on that you feel like draw more people to start to open up? I'm curious.
I think one of the most important ones is definitely the codependency and the people pleasing. That's a huge one, because it does affect you professionally. It does affect revenue. It does affect bottom line. It affects you also personally, and I think that's a big one. And that desire to always put out every fire, and the loss of time, and the guilt, the false guilt that comes with making decisions. I would say those three things are the things that my DMs get loaded when my calendar, because I always ask like, what inspired you to get on this call, or what, why do you want to make this call? Why do you want to make this investment? I'm losing time. The revenue is binary, but it's like I'm losing time, and I'm afraid to make decisions. I'm full of resentment because of the narratives that I've created. How do I find a way out of a pit that's been dug for so long? This is just a way of life for me at this point. And especially those who work in the corporate space, whether it's a small business, like especially small business tech, very high stress, you know, where you can be one person working like four different positions, how do I then thrive where I'm in survival mode? Um, and why do I have the disease, this disease to please? Where is this coming from? And I need to get some results. And also understanding that, whenever we're dealing with that on the surface, there's also a form of coping beneath the surface that other people don't see. I had one client who came to me, they were a coach, um, and at this point they had just had one enrollment, and they had some abuse of wine and cannabis. Now, both of those things are legal. Again, if you want to do cannabis, do cannabis. If you want to have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. But that was a major place of coping with them because of all the stresses on home front and business front. And we dealt with that. I mean, we dealt with their gut health. We dealt with their mindset. We dealt with the childhood version of them, the young adult version, the adult version. By the time we were done, they had 12 enrollments. And we had even reformulated some parts of their business. But we dealt with them from the inside out, from the root.
That's so powerful. And for people to be willing to, it's like the kudos to them for being willing to do the work. That must really, I would imagine that drives a lot of what you do when you see people that are like really stepping up and you're like, gosh, you've been through some stuff, but you keep showing up like that. Really, those people are the ones I admire like so much. Like you're in it and it's painful and it's uncomfortable and you still keep showing up.
Some of my clients are my heroes, man. Let me tell you.
I bet. We need more of that though, And so I'm curious, like I don't want to end this conversation without letting people know where they can find you. I know Nathan's going to drop the link. He'll drop it again and the link to your website he mentioned earlier. And I also, as we're wrapping, I just want to invite anyone to share what was like an insight or something that you heard today that was particularly valuable to you or timely. I just love to kind of get that perspective. So if you're whether you're listening to the live right now or you're listening to the replay, to drop in the comments to let us know what was particularly resonant for you today. What was particularly valuable or timely, or send us DMs where we're also great with that if it's something you don't want to put publicly. We've got your links there. So where can people continue to learn from your wisdom, Jahmaal?
I'm the only Jahmaal that spells my name the way I do on LinkedIn. Super easy to find me there. I'm very responsive there. Obviously, Listen and Speak, my website. If you want to email me directly and you don't want to kind of get into the DM ecosystem, Jahmaal@listenthenspeak.com. I don't want to give people too much stuff because when people hear too much stuff, it's like, I don't know which one to do. So connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and we'll just go from there. And if you want to jump on the calendar, like if you want to kind of understand this more and say, I need to talk to him more, Nathan, you should have my Calendly. It's also on my LinkedIn, but you can jump on my Calendly as well.
We'll get that in there. Are there any, you've shared so much wisdom today. You really have. I'm so glad. And as I mentioned, this is the first time we're having a conversation. It does not feel like the first time we're having a conversation. It feels like we've like done this before. But is there any final thoughts or perspectives or maybe a question that you want to leave people with as they walk away from this conversation today?
I don't want to leave them with that question. That'll be a little too heavy. But for anyone watching this on replay or who's here now, and if you feel like this conversation was resonant with you, don't wait. If not now, when? If not you, who? Time is our one non-renewable resource. So I'll leave people with that.
There we go. Okay, they're perfect. Well, Jahmaal, thank you so much. I'm excited for people to be able to listen to the recording of this. By the way, you'll be able to find it on LinkedIn, on YouTube. We'll drop the YouTube link in the LinkedIn comments as well in case anyone wants to go back or share this with somebody. If you found this episode valuable and you're like, somebody in my life needs to hear this conversation, by all means, feel free to share it. That's why we do this. This is one of the ways that we like to bring value to the people in our community, to be able to have these conversations and kind of let everybody kind of be a fly on the wall. And thank you to everyone who joined us today live. We got Tiffany and Jane and Phil and Liz and a LinkedIn user and Bill and Deb and Carla. And I just want to appreciate everybody who showed up today. And Jahmaal, thank you for everything that you shared and for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Rachel, thank you. I can't believe this is our first official conversation. I think we're kindred spirits. So
I think so too. I know. Well, hey, Baltimore, DC. So we got that going on.
Let's go.
All right, everybody. We will see you next month. The show is going to be on July 15th. So stay tuned for more details on that. But in the meantime, hope everybody has a fantastic week. And we'll see you on LinkedIn, everybody. Bye.